I finally finished this desk for a client that I've been making. It has a secret drawer. I'll put a link to the video that shows all of that for those of you that saw the other video. I want to introduce you to the Japanese carpenter square. This is called a Sashigane. There are other words for it, but it's typically referred to as a Sashigane. This one is in units that are traditionally used in Japan for building temples, etc., called sun and shaku. So, ishaku is 10 sun, 1 to 10, and it's about a foot long. If you play the shakuhachi, or if you've ever heard of the instrument, the Japanese flute called a shakuhachi, it's called a shakuhachi because traditionally the length of the shakuhachi is ishaku, 1 shaku, and hachi sun. So if you add 10 or 10 sun, 1 shaku, to 8 sun, you will get the length of a shakuhachi, which is why it's called a shakuhachi. And there's your Japanese lesson for the day. I wanted to show you this because it's really an innovative and amazing tool. This is what they use to build temples with those complicated roofs that you see with the angles going all different directions. This is all they use to get all those angles. So it's pretty amazing. But there are a couple of other features of this tool that are really neat. One of them being this measurement right here. If you look close, you'll be able to see that this measurement is much smaller than the sun measurements up here. And the reason for that is this measurement is the measurement times pi. So basically what you use this for is figuring out the circumference of a round object. So let's take my ball of tape here. Not a ball, sorry, my whatever of tape. And if I measure the diameter of this, I get, let's see, that's 5, right? So I get 3.5 or so. I get 3.5 sun. Okay, again, this is the Japanese units of measurement, sun. So I get 3.5 sun. So let's test this. We'll get a pen here, and we will put a mark right where the tape ends. And now we're going to lay down our ruler. So make sure I got the sun marks. Here we go. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sun, right? I think we said it was 3.5 sun, right? So now I'm going to take the tape off, and I'll open it up, put this down here, and I'll open it up until we get to that mark. Oops. Until we get to that mark that we made right there. And if we measure this, let's rip that off, we will see that it is, oh, lo and behold, 1, 2, 3, almost 5 sun. Now I took some of the tape off, so the diameter changed a little bit, but you can see now that you can measure the circumference of a round object using this scale in here. And this scale is the measurement times the square root of 2, if I remember correctly. And what that enables you to do, actually right here, sorry, on the outside, what that enables you to do is figure out the largest length of a square object from a round object. I know that was really hard to understand. What I mean is, if you have a round object, like a log, for example, let's say this is the end of the log. If I'm looking at this log and I'm going to build something with it, right? So I want to create a square timber. I want a square timber, but since this is round, I don't know the largest square timber that I can get out of this log. But with this Sashigane, that'll tell you. What you do is you measure the diameter with this measurement on the outside, which I said earlier was the end result multiplied by the square root of 2, and I'll see that I get 1, 2, and let's see, 2.3 sun. 2.3 sun on this measurement. So that should be the longest face that I can get if I were to make a square log. And if I flip this over, what was it here? It was 2.3, right? 2.3 sun. So then if I take 2.3 and I measure that 1, 2, 3, we'll see that it's about that long, right? And if I were to go all the way around, 2.3, 2.3, you can see now that I'm marking out the dimensions of the largest square timber that I could get out of this round piece of wood, like so. Now this is very crude, and I'm doing it on the back of a vintage wax tub here, so it's not very accurate, but you understand what I'm trying to say. So this is what they would use to figure out the largest timber that you could get from a log. Now the other thing, and actually before I go further, let me just say that you can also get these modern ones in centimeters. This has the same measurements. On the inside here, this is your result times pi, and then on the inside here you have your result times the square root of 2. So you can do the exact same thing that I did earlier. If I measure the circumference here, it says about 10. This is going to be, the circumference of this object should be about 10 centimeters. So again, if I mark that there, and let's get rid of this one. And if I open that up to where we have our mark, and I measure that, boom, 10 centimeters. So that's very handy for figuring out the circumference of an object. And again, you can do the same thing, figuring out the largest square timber from a round log. But the most impressive thing about this tool is that you can figure out angles. And the way they do that is when they're building a structure, they decide on a slope. Say they're going to do a 5 sun slope. So gosun kobai is what it would be called. And what that means is they would place the sashigane down so that the bottom of a triangle that you would make, a right triangle, would be 1 shaku. So it'd be 10 sun. So from here to here. And then they go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This hypotenuse that you get from the 5 to the 10 is your gosun kobai, or your 5 sun slope, as they were called. Let me get some paper so this will be a little easier to see. So let's say they decided to use a gosun slope, or a 5 sun slope. What they would do is, for the bottom of a triangle, or I should say, they'd start by drawing a triangle, a right triangle, with the bottom at 10, ishaku, and then 5. So flip that over, and it'll go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is 5 sun, and this is 10 sun, or ishaku. And then you would connect it to get your hypotenuse. And this is your gosun slope, gosun kobai. Now, from here, they use the Sashigane again, and these different measurements, like I explained earlier, they have different measurements on different sides. And your main sun measurements are in this side. You can see that the short side is the same as the long side in terms of the length of the units. If I get a little closer, you'll be able to see that. They're both sun. But if I flip it over, you'll see that this remains the same as this side. They're both sun. But these measurements are longer than these. And this is called the urane. So, well, they would go back to this triangle that they drew, gosun kobai triangle, gosun slope triangle. And then, since this is ishaku, or 10 sun, they would go and they would put the Sashigane here on 10 from the urame, or the back side. And they would continue this bottom part of the triangle out. And I ran out just a little bit of piece of paper there, but let's say that this is 10 from the opposite side of sun. And then they would connect your hypotenuse, if I remember that's what it's called, on a triangle. You connect your hypotenuse up here, right? And then they'd go from the hypotenuse of the original triangle, and they would draw a right angle from that hypotenuse down to the corner, so that this is a right angle. This is a right angle over here. And then they would figure out half of the side of the triangle. So if it's 5, that's going to be 2.5 is going to be your halfway point. And then they'll draw another line from the corner to the halfway mark. Boom. And then they would again draw a right angle from here to this corner. That's a right angle. And then half of this, let's flip this over here. Half of this side of the triangle, this is about 7, so that's going to be 3.5. And then from there to there, is another slope. And as we do this, again, you can extend this. This is a Gosun on your normal scale, but if I flip it over to Urame and I measure out 5, then that extends the line up to here. And then I connect again to this one point. So what I'm doing is I'm using a base triangle, this Gosun, this 5-sun slope triangle, and then extending the lines and connecting them to this central point to get all these different slopes. So this is a different slope angle, this is a different slope, that's a different one, that's a different, these are different slope angles. And they would record all of these lengths on this triangle. So if they decided that a portion of the roof is going to be the slope from this original triangle, then when they're cutting their wood, what they would do is, if we want this slope from the Gosun or the Gosun slope triangle, they would take the Sashigane and they would put one side on Ishaku. Let's say I wanted to have the line here. I wanted to cut this wood and have the slope be the slope for that, the Gosun slope. So I would put the Sashigane at 5 here, and then over on this side I line it up with 10, which, if you remember, is the length of the bottom of that one triangle. And this gives me my 5-sun slope angle. And they would do that for different parts of the roof. Like I mentioned earlier, Japanese roofs on temples are very complex. If you look here in this book, you can see it has different slopes. This is a better picture. You see how all these different slopes are incorporated into the end of the roof, and they needed to know how to measure each of those slopes. So they would create a triangle based on a certain slope angle and then take all the measurements off of that one triangle. Now, you can do the same thing with modern woodworking. If you want to build a desk, for example, that has sloped legs, right? Let's just do draw the top of a desk. Right? And let's say you want to draw, or I'm sorry, you want to have splayed legs on it. Right? Well, this angle is going to be the same as an angle if you had an apron on it. So you want to have an apron, and you want to attach the apron by mortising tenon into the leg. This angle here is going to be the same as this angle here on the bottom. And if you decide that's going to be like 3 sun, maybe a 3 sun slope, then to get that angle, to cut that angle on your legs, all you got to do is take your Sashigane and put the 3 on the end of the board and match it up with 10. Let's do it this way so it's easier to see. I have my 3 on that side, and then I have 10 over here, and now this is that angle. So that's the angle of your leg. It's going to be on the opposite side, and you cut that. And it's also going to be the same angle as this apron here that's going to be attached to your leg. Now, I know you're saying, well, I can't get one of these. This is a Japanese one in sun, and I don't know how to read sun anyway. Well, they also sell ones in centimeters. I'm not sure if you can get them abroad, but you can also make your own, like I did here. All you do is take 2 pieces of plywood and joint them together with a bridle joint, and then take a ruler and mark out your centimeter marks or inches or whatever you want to do. And then, because it's thick, obviously this is a very thin piece of metal, so you can take the measurement right off the top of the Sashigane. But if you make your own, you're going to have this thickness to deal with. So what I did was, after I marked off the centimeter marks, then I took a square and I marked them down to the bottom, so that when I'm using this on an actual piece of wood, if I want to line up to get a certain angle, like let's say I want to do a 7 centimeter slope. Here's my 5, 6, 7, there's my 7 mark right there, and I can follow that down. 5, 6, 7, follow that down to the edge of the board, is there, and then make sure that I line up my Sashigane with, in this case, I'll do 30 centimeters, 7 on this side, 30 over here, and then this gives me my slope that I want to cut. So whatever I'm making, if I'm making a table that has splayed legs or whatever, I'm going to use that angle on all of the components. And that's it. I know it was thoroughly confusing. It is very, very complicated. In Japanese, it's called kikujutsu, which is the art of being able to use a Sashigane to figure out all these different angles when you're building the roof of a temple, etc. And it takes many years to learn. I just studied practicing and learning about it over the last year or so, but I thought it was neat. And for people that use Western tools, you've probably never used the Sashigane or seen it or know how it's used. So I thought that would be informative. So let me show you an example of how this is used for roofing. I've taken the Sashigane and I have drawn different angles according to a design in one of the books that I have for making a part of a roof, the end of the roof in particular. And now I'm going to cut it apart and show you how it all goes together to create those different angles and slopes that we talked about earlier. It's very difficult. I am unfortunately not good enough with my Japanese saw here to saw it correctly as it should be, but you'll get an idea for exactly how everything will go together if you do everything correctly. So I'll let you watch the video, and thanks very much for stopping by. Please subscribe if you haven't, and click the like button for me if you can. I'd appreciate it. Thanks a lot.